Morning, everybody. It's Dr. Dorian Dugmore speaking, linked with Dualife, for which I'm a consultant um, medical specialist, and I'm also linked tonight with the World Healthy Living Foundation, which is some of the great work that Dualife do, supporting health and well-being in underdeveloped countries. So my background is I was a former professional athlete, and then I went into sports medicine, have a PhD in cardiovascular medicine, ran the largest center in the world in Toronto for a number of years, and then took all the lessons from that, came back to the United Kingdom and built corporate wellness programs for some very big brands, including Adidas, who luckily for us won World Best Practice for Corporate Wellness. And then we've just built a major program for Lancashire County Football Association, which has just been voted as the best workplace wellness program in Britain. So I've worked a lot with top executives and with top sports performers and a lot of employees in the corporate world. So without further ado, we'll get on to the presentation. So tonight we're going to talk about key elements that affect performance and how we help to build resilience. So that will be our topic for this evening. Okay, so if we move on, then one of the key things to realize is that looking after health and well-being isn't just about the body, but it's particularly about both the heart and the brain, and the two are closely interconnected. Just heard some recent research actually publicized today that probably 1 in 2 of us as we age can run the risk of premature dementia. So it's so important to look at health and well-being, and particularly the health of the brain when we talk about optimizing performance and building resilience. That is very, very important indeed. So the brain, then 2% of body weight, uses 20% of our energy, and over 70% of it is water. So if you forget everything else this evening, then it's very, very important to keep well hydrated. And still water, cool still water, is the best water to drink, because that has a more effective hydrating effect, because that cool still water permeates the cell wall far more effectively than carbonated water, the water with the bubbles. Still, you get a hydrating effect from that, but the best choice is still water. And there are billions and billions, 86 billion actually, nerve cells in the brain that we need to look after as we work through the age range continuum. Okay, so if we move on to our next slide, then if you look at the slide there, the brain on the left-hand side is a 30, 35-year-old brain, and the brain on the right-hand side is a 75-year-old brain. And as we can see from that, then as the brain ages, the convolutions, the matrix that makes up the brain tends to become a little bit smaller. The spaces between the various convolutions tends to be greater. And that is a common effect of the brain as it ages. So if we move on to the next slide, then straight away, the important cell of the brain is called a neuron. And the neuron has a central point, like a heart in the middle there, called the axon. And then linked with that, it's like a telephone system. You've got lots of interconnections with other cells in the brain, because this is just one cell, and they're called dendrites. And it's like a massive telephone system where all of these cells interconnect, and these dendrites interconnect with each other. And that's a very, very healthy nerve cell called a neuron in the brain. But as we age, then the connections decrease, and those neurons and dendrites tend to become a little less as we age through the age range continuum. So there we are. There's a typical example of the 75, 80-year-old brain, where you can see that the dendrites, those twig-like structures, have certainly thinned out and disintegrated a little bit, which can affect your brain's performance. and we're talking about optimizing performance. And so that's very important to realize some of the effects of that as it happens. And so um, if you compare a 75-year-old brain with a 30-year-old brain, then the functionality as we age slows a little bit and declines. Doesn't mean to say the brain's not effective. Doesn't mean to say that the brain is not performing well, but it will take longer to process things like auditory stimulation. So listening to things, understanding things, processing information can slow down as the brain ages. Doesn't mean it has to. And there are obviously differences between individuals. And there are lots of things we can do to promote a healthy brain, to optimize performance, and challenge the brain. So it's important to realize that although the brain can age, then functional performance can still be at a very, very good level. And so why is that important? Well, we mentioned in a previous presentation, if you look at life expectancy, it's forever increasing. So if you can avoid the major diseases like heart disease and cancer and diabetes, then females can expect to live to their mid to late 80s, and males uh, similar, but a little bit less, sort of mid 80s, maybe a little bit lower. But that really means, in effect, that you're looking at a third of your lifespan beyond the age of probably early retirement in the 50s, 60s, where a third of your life you can look forward to, hopefully in a healthy condition, in a healthy state, fit, and able to do a lot of the things you dreamed of doing, but maybe didn't have a chance to do earlier on in your career because you are busy with career development, with families, with probably chasing the dream. And now, when you reach that final third, you can hopefully look forward to maximizing its potential because you're in good shape and in good health. So, why does brain fitness matter? Well, it means that you've got to perform throughout that age range continuum and really, hopefully, maximize your brain's performance and your heart's performance throughout your lifespan. And that's so, so important. So, what is the effect of stress on the brain? Well, um, again, as opposed to optimizing performance, stress can actually help those dendrites disintegrate and get reduced as constant stress takes its toll on the body. And we know from all the international research now that stress is as effective a risk factor as some of the main ones we know around heart disease, like high cholesterol, high blood pressure, high blood sugars in terms of risk for diabetes. And stress is right up there with its effect on your health and well-being. And of course, it will help destroy your resilience and performance, and it will really compromise your health and well-being. And with constant stress, then you get brain cell degeneration, a bit like the aging um, degeneration we showed you earlier. The connectivity and the neurotransmission, the ability of those nerves in the brain to talk to each other will be reduced. And of course, that will impact on things like memory. Certainly, it'll impact on things like emotional control and anxiety can be a real challenge if you're constantly stressed and pressured. Even depression and things like that can affect your health and your well-being. So these are some of the effects that will compromise, of course, performance. So important to realize that. The two villains of stress, which we've mentioned very briefly previously, are those two little purple blobs on top of the kidneys. They're called the suprarenal glands. And we know that when they get fired up, they produce a lot of adrenaline or produce a cascade that contributes to producing adrenaline and another thing called cortisol. And adrenaline can actually ramp up your fight or flight mechanism, raise your blood pressure, raise your heart rate, even help to develop the production of extra cholesterol in your body. So it's a stress reaction that is stimulated by two little glands. And then cortisol can actually affect your immune function, your ability to fight off viruses and infections, because cortisol can help to reduce the effectiveness of your white blood cells, particularly a part of those cells called the T lymphocytes. And when that happens, your ability to fight off infection gets reduced. What does that really mean? It means you're more susceptible to colds and viruses and infections. And so that's some of the effects of stress. The other side of stress, though, is if you are really, really stressed and you become angry and very, very anxious, we know from all the research from Harvard Medical School that it increases your likelihood of getting things like heart attacks. And some classic research from Harvard shows that when 1,600 heart attack victims were interviewed to check their anger levels right before they had the cardiac event, anger more than doubled their likelihood of having that heart attack. So some of the people I've worked with over the years, some of the football managers, including many in the Premiership, are great examples of being very, very stressed. And of course, we know that some of those scenarios have helped cause heart problems, not just in football managers, but in chief executives, in people that have leadership roles. And so being cool, being calm will help you deal with pressures and stress and help you optimize your performance. Okay, so some really interesting research from Nagoya University in Japan. And there, a major research project actually asked participants to write down their angry reactions on paper when they'd got really upset, and when they'd written them all down, to screw them up and to throw them away and put them in a rubbish bin or a rubbish basket, as you can see there. And that method eliminated angry feelings almost entirely. And so, what a clever piece of research to say that one of the things that you're doing is you're passing on that anger and that hostility and that anxiety, writing the things that have caused that anger down on paper, and then screwing it up and throwing it away. And it's almost as if you're throwing away the tension that you've allowed to build up because you have become very, very angry and anxious. So fascinating research from Nagoya University. So this is the stress curve. And you can see from the stress curve, there is a bell-shaped curve. And where we want to live is that white circle right in the middle of the bell-shaped curve, where we are coping, but we are not pushing ourselves too much to the right-hand side of that curve, where we become exhausted and very tired, very anxious. We lose control, we panic, and eventually that can lead to breakdown. Dr. Christian Pickard, she did some fascinating research on looking at that stress curve, and she said that we probably all have about 15 or 16 stress-resistant factors, and probably work uses up 9 or 10 of them, maybe family challenges and different things that are a little bit stressful can use up another 4 or 5 of them, but we've got a couple in reserve to cope with emergencies. However, if we're constantly stressed and constantly under pressure, one of the problems can be that instead of using those 15 or 16 stress resistant factors, we over budget on those factors, go over the top, and that's when we drive down the right hand side of the stress curve there. So the optimum levels, where that white circle is in the middle, are the areas where performance is probably at its best, but pushing too much to the right-hand side is a problem. And equally so, not having sufficient amount of stress on the left-hand side, too little stress, can also cause problems. So that idea is to be right there in the middle if we can to optimize our performance. So this is a thing that I use a lot with leaders and managers and chief executives and people in the business world and the sporting world, and it's called the emotional landscape. And if we are on the left-hand side of that landscape, as you look at it, you can see cortisol. And if we are on that left-hand side, the stress side, then because we're frustrated, we're angry, we're anxious, we're very defensive, adrenaline and cortisol start to ramp up in the body. And when we think about the reaction of that over time, it's draining. And so, what some of those responses can be, we can lose a little bit of interest, become very cynical, become exhausted, almost feel defeated. And of course, the thing we want to avoid is that horrible word burnout, where we've been under so much stress that we really have felt the effect on our health and we feel burnt out. Compare that to the right hand side of that landscape, the resilient side. And if we are looking after our health and well-being, and that's where taking some of the Dual Life products can have a major impact. Things like Dual Life Day and Dual Life Night can really be beneficial to support our energies, support all the healthy metabolism in our bodies. And then that gives us the energy to be dynamic, passionate about what we do, and confident in what we're doing, and connected with lots of other people. And that also means that when pressure comes along and we talk about building resilience, we're cool under pressure, we're able to control the situation, and we're in a relaxed and a peaceful state of mind. That's so important because if we're on the left-hand side, the cortisol side, then that is going to increase our health risk. Whereas if we're on the right-hand side, where it says DHEA, that's the anti-aging hormone, we start to produce the benefits of key hormones that are endorphin-based and good for our health. Things like serotonin, the brain connector, oxytocin, the love chemical, dopamine, the one that puts you on that relaxed high, and of course DHEA, the anti-aging chemical. So those are very, very important indeed. And to get the balance right between the two will help optimize performance and build resilience. And that's so important to realize. So, what are the effects of too much stress? Well, some of them are listed there. And the first one, loss of mental clarity. You're easily distracted, more likely to make mistakes. That leads you to being almost separated from other people, a little bit edgy, a little bit shut off from other people, tend to be really isolated. And of course, that highlights the effect of stress, which can then impact your sleep and your ability to relax. And of course, that will then affect your self confidence and your ability to feel in control of what you're doing. Then you tend to spend more energy than you're able to recover from and to recoup from, which makes you feel tired. And being tired is almost the new operational norm. And then you're going to struggle to motivate yourself and to encourage others and to motivate others. And when you put all those things together, then you become more anxious, you feel more insecure, and you're not in control of what you're doing in terms of your work and your life balance. And so these are key warning signs to heed and take a note of when you're looking at being very, very stressed. And three key things that can affect that are volume, time, and control. What does that mean? Well, volume means taking on a major amount of work and other challenges that can involve family and life outside of work. And you get so much work and so much to do that you almost can't cope because there's too much to cope with. And the next one is the time you've got to be able to cope. And then one of those time rush scenarios can happen to people where they've taken on so much that they haven't got time to do any of the things properly, and they put themselves under pressure. What does that lead to? That leads to loss of control. And when you lose control and your ability to really maximize your lifestyle and your work and your family, then all those things together come to increase the stress and pressure in your life. And of course, that will impact performance and reduce your ability to optimize that performance. So that's absolutely key. And the villain in the piece is that little chimp in the midbrain there. It's called the amygdala. And the amygdala reacts 200 times more readily to stress and pressure than the higher centers in the brain called the cortex. And those higher centers are the areas of the brain that help you balance things out and make more sensible and careful decisions. However, if the chimp, the amygdala, takes over because you're constantly stressed, you'll get angry more quickly, all the things we said on the previous slide. And that amygdala reacts 200 times more readily, as I've mentioned, to stress and pressure than the cortex and the higher centers of the brain. And here's the problem. The problem is that you can get dominated by the amygdala and react and overreact to certain situations that don't really deserve that sort of reaction and put yourself under pressure. So important to realize. And part of that whole scenario comes from the heart. And the heart actually sends 80% more messages back to the brain than the other way around. And so emotional control and thinking about things in a balanced way, with an emotional balance, can really impact very carefully on your health and make a big difference. So the heart is very important. And here's a classic. I've shown this slide before, but it's an interesting one. It's about a husband and wife who are having an argument. And the argument is about reading a map. The wife is reading the road map and the husband is driving. And you can see what's happened there. As the wife said something that got under the husband's skin, look what's happened to the heart rate. It's zoomed up. And this is beat by beat analysis of the heart. And you can see what's happening. In the middle of the argument, the middle section of the slide, that heart rate is jumping about from 90 beats a minute to 140 beats a minute. It's all over the place. What's driving that? The things we talked about earlier, adrenaline and cortisol. And after the argument's finished, look what happens to the heart. It doesn't come back down to resting levels. It remains elevated after the argument ends. And the half-life of things like adrenaline and cortisol can be up to 8 hours. So when you've lost the plot and you really think, okay, I'm calm now, sometimes your body chemistry takes a lot longer to calm down. So if you can avoid those sort of situations and be calmer, it's a very good thing for your health and well-being and for you making rational decisions. So if you move on to the next slide, here's the amygdala. That red blob in the middle there is the amygdala. Now, if you're angry and upset, then what happens, next slide, you'll see that there's activation of that amygdala and you get that erratic heart rate that's all over the place. Whereas if you're calm, the green arrow there shows a more regular heart rhythm and a greater, it's called heart rate variability, a greater range of your heart rate as it reacts to everyday challenges and everyday living. Which is the healthiest one to live by? Certainly the green one, because when the green one takes over, you then send further messages via the hippocampus, the purpley half moon there, that then passes those messages to the thinking centers and the key centers of the brain that are far more rational, whereas it tends to stop if you're constantly stressed and pressured at the amygdala. So, two very important elements to realize about keeping healthy, but also optimizing your performance and building resilience. So, personal resilience, what is it? Well, personal resilience is about your mental toughness. It's about your ability to think clearly, particularly under pressure, and to get the results that you need and to think with clarity. And building that resilience helps you look after yourself, have greater relationships, allows you to cope with whatever life throws at you. And that resilience is actually building your capacity to avoid failure, to avoid breaking down under pressure. It gives you, it's like a personal health insurance policy. And by building resilience, then you can protect yourself against the elements of stress that we talked about earlier and the dominance of the chimp and the amygdala. So, if we move on from there, I love this acronym called ROPES because each of the letters of ROPES stands for a particular element that helps you build resilience. Produced by a guy called John Sunderland Wright, who I've had the pleasure of working with very often. And he uses this acronym to say each letter stands for things you should do to build resilience. And the first one is R. And R stands for regulation. It's around time management. It's about planning your time effectively, doing probably the more challenging things in your life earlier in the day, and then doing the more mundane things as the day goes on and you maybe get a little bit more tired. So regulating and planning will help you avoid the damage of stress and help you build resilience. Always for optimism. And optimism is about happiness. We've talked in previous presentations about how important it is to be happy, how important it is to have a positive outlook on life. And when you do that and you have that can do attitude, you know, glass half full, then your body chemistry changes and you produce more endorphins, the things we talked about earlier, compared to the stress reaction where you start to produce the stress chemistry that will impact on your health and well-being. So to help you develop that optimism, P, the next letter, is for purpose. And people that are successful and can build resilience and optimize their performance have a very clear purpose and clear goals in their life. And one of the things that I do a lot with people to look after their health is ask them to write their own mission statement, their own wellness statement for their own health and well-being. And then behind that wellness mission statement, I ask them to write down their 6 key goals that will help them really promote their health and well-being. So a clear purpose, a clear goal, clear targets you have will help build your resilience and optimize your performance. E is for energy. And energy is about, if you like, the gas or the petrol that you put into your body. So the right foods to eat, the right supplements to take from, which we'll mention later, from Dual Life is key for energy. And of course, the other key thing is to actually exercise regularly and build your energy reserves because the systems in your body are fit and in good shape. Which leads us on to the very last letter in the ropes model, S for stamina. What that will build, if we get all those other things right, it will build your energy to survive some of the challenging times during the day and to be able to renew and get ready and fit and healthy to go again for the next day and to enjoy your life because you've got the stamina to build that resilience as you go through your everyday work challenges, family challenges, and the whole sort of 9 yards of really keeping yourself in great shape. So that's so important. So to build resilience, then what are the things that you can actually do? Well, this is from a company called HeartMath in the United States, in California, and they have some great ideas about how you build resilience and how you cope with stresses and pressures. It's called freeze frame. So the first thing in number one is to imagine you've got something that's challenging. And the first step to deal with it is to recognize the stressful feeling around that and press an imaginary pause button. It's actually like putting your car into neutral so that you're diffusing the situation by pressing an imaginary pause button. The next one in number two is to shift your focus to the area around your heart and imagine you're breathing in through your heart, and do it in a rhythmical way. So you breathe in for 5 seconds and out for 5 seconds. Now you're breathing in through your nose and your mouth, but imagine as you're doing that breath that the breath is coming in through your heart and out through your heart, and you're breathing in and out a little bit more deeply. The effect of that is to engage a nerve in the center of your chest called the vagus nerve, and it's called a vasovagal reaction, and it puts you on a relaxed high. It helps to stimulate some of the endorphins and neutralize some of the bad chemistry that comes with too much stress. Then in number three, think and remember a positive feeling, re-experience a positive feeling. It may be lying on your favorite beach, listening to the waves coming in as they touch you on the shore and then go out again. But pick on something that gives you a real positive feeling of relaxation and go there as if you're there on that beach. And then coupled with the breathing and the emotional feeling of being in a great place, then's the time in number four where you ask yourself, what would be a more efficient reaction to the challenge that I've had in the first place in number one? And then write down the first thoughts that come into your mind that help you really get the right intuition to deal with the challenge and the problem that you had. That's why it's called freeze frame. You should freeze in a moment of time. And Jim Lear in the Corporate Athlete says we should practice that sort of technique every 90 minutes throughout the working day, only for 2 minutes, because what you're doing is you're putting your whole energy system into neutral and giving yourself a little bit of a chance to recover and to really deal with any challenges that come along. So I love that idea of freeze frame. Michael Gray, a neuroscientist I work very closely with, said, listen, another great thing you can do, a little by some of the research from Nagoya University, is that if you're worried about things, then don't take them to bed. To manage chronic stress and to optimize your performance, do what he calls a brain dump. And a brain dump is before you go to bed and relax and try and rest and recover, write down all the challenges and issues and things you're worried about on a piece of paper and dump them. Because to be honest, when you're sleeping, you can't do anything about them. What you really want is for your sleep to re-energize you, to help you renew your energies, for your cells to repair, because that's what happens during sleep. And so by doing a brain dump, that will park the worries until the next day, when hopefully you can deal with them far more effectively using some of the techniques we talked about earlier. So I love that idea of a brain dump. Also, the other key thing you've got to do to optimize your performance is to schedule time for yourself. And we're very good at the challenges that come along with work and the challenges that come along interpersonally with families. But very often, we're often guilty of not actually programming some time for ourselves. And that is so, so important. So, one of the things I say to top leaders and to sports managers is make an appointment for yourself in your diary. And that is a really good tip that says, okay, at some point during the day, I'm going to have some me time, some time where I actually look after myself. And that will certainly help me manage some of the stress and challenges that come along. Okay, so coming towards a close now, but how important is all of the things that I've said to optimize your performance, build resilience? Well, this is some classic research by a researcher called Ralph Paffenbarger, and he wrote a book called Life Fit. And he looked at up to 70,000 people over a period of 70 years, one of the largest studies ever produced in the world. And he looked at the vitality of those people, you can see on the horizontal scale there, against their age as they went through the age range continuum from 35 to 85. And he said, what do people usually expect? What's the typical thing that happens to people? Well, the typical thing is people's vitality goes down as people age. Is it that true? Well, he has another group called the pessimistically optimistic. And they're a group that every now and again look after themselves a little bit more effectively, watch what they eat, maybe exercise spasmodically, but do some things that can benefit their health. And the curve doesn't decline as rapidly. However, the one to really look at is the ideal, the one at the top. And those are people that exercise regularly, ate a healthy diet, managed their weight, looked after the stress in their lives and tried to deal with it as effectively as they could, as we've mentioned already, and then had a really, really good social network. And when you add all those together, then they only lost around 12% of the vitality they had in their 30s in their 80s. And what's the difference between the typical and the ideal? That triangle there, it's called quality of life. And so, what you want to do as you age is to protect that quality of life, protect your vitality by helping to optimize your performance, manage your stress, and build your resilience. And there's the key message there. Okay, so if we move on to the next slide, remember, key one, to stay hydrated. Water is the elixir of life, and we should be drinking 2 to 3 liters of water every day. Dehydration is the energy of good performance, is the antithesis, sorry, of good performance. It drains your energy. So you need to keep well hydrated and make sure that you drink regularly throughout the day. And the easiest way to test that is when you go to the bathroom, you just look at the color of your urine. And as a very famous doctor once said to me, you know, if it's any darker than your average Pinot Grigio, then you're dehydrated and you should drink more water. So it's so, so important to do. And eating a balanced diet and supplementing it with the right sort of supplements, which we'll mention in a moment, is key. So these are some very, very healthy foods. Blueberries, they're a superfood. Wild salmon, omega-3, omega-6, omega-9 fatty acids, so key. Dark chocolate gets a bad rap, but if you've got a choice for chocolate, dark chocolate is good. And caffeine gets a bad rap. It's actually an antioxidant, especially if it's good quality caffeine, but probably you shouldn't drink it after 3 o'clock because it'll keep you awake at night. So some of the great foods are listed there. And of course, we support them by all the great Dual Life supplements that we are fully aware of. Okay, and remember, alcohol, too much alcohol will cause problems. So you should limit no more than probably 11 to 14 units a week with at least 2 to 3 days where you don't touch alcohol, because too much alcohol can actually increase risk So sensible alcohol consumption is really important. And remember, the brain changes with experience. So as we get older, we should learn new things, do new things, as I think is shown in the next few slides. So take on some challenges, learn that foreign language that you've avoided doing until now. Get some jigsaws and look at those. Learn a new musical instrument. So do some things that challenge your brain and keep your brain active, because your brain benefits from those sorts of activities and being challenged. So exercise together with mental challenges is the key to a healthy brain and optimizing your performance. And laughter and happiness, remember, they're so important. Somebody said to me recently, laughter is like an instant vacation. And so important because it produces endorphins, it produces the chemistry that benefits our health. So that is, again, critically important. And remember that laughter is key. Begin your day with 3 gratitudes. We've mentioned that before. 3 things that you're grateful for. Hug from a loved one. It's a beautiful day, the sun's shining. Whatever those 3 things that you're grateful for are, remember them and write one of them down on your computer, on your notebook, because the sheer fact of committing pen to paper solidifies a very positive mood as the day goes on. Make a connection with somebody you care about. It's amazing the effect that social networking has, and the friendship and the energy that comes with that, so important. And remember to practice 3 random acts of kindness, 3 things you do for somebody else that makes a difference. Costs you nothing. A smile, opening a door for someone, letting a car out at the T-junction, saying thank you to somebody that served you in a very, very nice way. All of those sorts of things can make a real difference to optimize your performance and making a great day happen. And then remember to share success. Celebrate with other people. That's so important when you put them all together to develop a very positive attitude and optimize your performance. Okay. Hi. So here are some of the things that would be great for your brain and your health and well-being. Dual Life My Mind. That is superb in terms of optimizing all the energies we've talked about earlier. And you can see some of the wonderful vitamins and minerals that are listed there. I haven't got time to go through them all. But when you take that, and it's a lovely, when you drink My Mind, you can feel the goodness going into your body as you take that drink, and that will optimize all the good things that should happen in your mind, like production of endorphins, all the things you said earlier. So they're very, very important indeed. Chlorophyll, very, very good for reducing any inflammations and protecting the health and well-being of your body. Again, it combines very readily with My Mind to really benefit your performance. I think Dual Life Day and Dual Life Night, those are the flagships of Dual Life, and they contain a myriad of wonderful vitamins and minerals that will benefit your health and well-being. And so important to protect your functionality and your performance and optimize that performance as you go through life. And I think, yeah, My Blood, key. All the key B vitamins in particular are within My Blood, and that is vital because 70-80% of your body is blood. And so that is critically important to keep yourself healthy and in good shape. And then to protect you against viruses, infections, particularly in terms of a healthy mind, Prolumino, very, very key for your health and well-being from a mental point of view. So I think we've probably come towards the end there. Thank you so much for listening to me. I hope you've got a lot of return for sharing that 40 minutes with me. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you and to really support using some of the great Duolife products that will make a real difference to your health and well-being. Have a great evening, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Ciao.